Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a talk about the Dutch version of the Freedom of Information Act. We call it the WOB, Wet Openbaarheid Bestuur. Brenno de Winter, who is a freelance journalist, he writes for webwereld nu.nl, has been conducting a couple of these cases, asking for information about, especially about open source. A couple of weeks ago, he organized a benefit because, indeed, to organize this request for freedom of information, you do need some money. You do need sometimes to be able to start a procedure or a court case if you don't get the material that you want. There were lots of people. He got some money, but the most interesting thing is that the government forbade most of its civil servants to show up at this meeting. So much for government transparency. Brenno, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And it's so cool that Karen is introducing me. I'm Brenno de Winter. The most important thing that you need to know is currently that I do HAR FM. And of course, you've been all listening. We are going to talk about WokTheWob. And as Karen explained, the WOB, Wet Openbaarheid van Bestuur, is the short name. You might have heard it actually in a website, Wobbing Europe. And that is due to an expert, Roger Vleugels, who was supposed to be here but turned out to be ill. And he made WOB so popular internationally that they started to use it instead of Freedom of Information Act, which would be the proper English term. I want to know what it is. Then I want to show you that you can use such a mean to get information on open standards and open source and even hack the government a little bit. And then some major issues that you can face when you ask for transparency. And then, of course, how to fight them. Who am I? I'm a geek, 37 years old, journalist, and more importantly, now doing HAR FM. I'm a hacker, and somebody in a Dutch medium called me a serial wobber. The Freedom of Information Act, what is it? Well, it's basically a law where you can say, like, okay, you've got documents, you haven't published them, I want them to be open for everybody. Everybody should be able to see and read them. So you want to get access to these documents. And you will notice that at some points I'll start to be extremely precise, because asking information in the Netherlands is a very precise job. I'll explain that in a second. And one of the interesting things is there are a couple of things in administrative law, that is the thing we are talking about, basically, in administrative law that the government has to do. Basically, our legal system is shaped in such a way that when you're a civilian, the government needs to help you. The government needs to, for instance, send requests along. So, for instance, when you send a request to the Amsterdam police, and it should be at the Rotterdam police, then the Amsterdam police has to send it along. In many cases, they don't do this. They wait 2 weeks, which is the current period they can wait, and then all of a sudden send a letter like, oh, you're at the wrong office. There's a lot you can do about it, I'll tell you that later. And also, if you don't understand what you're doing or you're asking the question wrong, the party you are asking the information from is by law required to help you. How often do you think they do that? Remember this requirement, because I will refer to the city that was hosting What the Heck in a second, and then I will refer to this rule again. And I think the law is so useful and it is so important to disclose documents to the public. What a lot of people think is that if I ask it, it's my property, but it's not. What you're asking is, government, show the public what is in these documents, and also, please be so kind to give it to me as well in a copy. But you don't have to do that. Actually, in one case, I was asking to disclose information from a city. And I got a letter, like 4 weeks later, like, you asked the following information. We have made a decision. You can read the decision on our website. Go to, and then a URL. And there was indeed my information. And the first response, of course, for me was like, what the fuck? And then the second response was like, no, this is brilliant. This is exactly what I asked for. Because in the law is also a provision that you can ask for the way you get your information. Do you want it on paper or do you want it in a digital form? In general, what you will get is you get things on paper, even if when you ask it in digital form. Now, let me be very precise. If I get something in a digital form, in a paper form, when I ask for it in a digital form, they've made the decision to disclose, but they haven't executed it. This sounds like stupid, but it's very handy when you have to appeal the decision. Because then you can say, well, you didn't do this, you did this wrong, and you also never executed your decision. And legally, that's not allowed. And that makes it easier to win cases. And now maybe you start to think, what a bullshit. Why do I have to go through all these hoops and think in such a slick way? Because you said the city or the government is required to help you. Because there's theory on this side, and the reality is somewhere totally here. Now, I decided to start and help the government in disclosing information and help journalists in disclosing information. I started a website called wobber.nl. And what I do is when I get documents in and they're in paper form, I'll help the government make it a digital form. And of course, make sure that you can the text is ready for search engines so everybody can access it to the maximum extent. So it helps governments to publicize for everybody. Second advantage, journalists currently are not really common of when they do a FOIA request. They say like, we found the following in the FOIA request, and then maybe they show you a little bit of the information they found. What I started to do is, according to a FOIA request I made, link to my site, I draw the following inferences. And what I've noticed is, it always used to be like the journalist doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's wrong, and it definitely isn't in these documents, and what is he keeping behind? End of discussion. I haven't had a single case where somebody was complaining about the articles, because now everybody can read it. And it happens. There was this morning in January when I was walking with my dog through, we've got this little forest right by my house, and I was walking through the woods, and there was this 80-year-old lady that I every morning see, and she was nearly crying because there were some trees out of 1736 or so, and the city apparently had decided to cut them all. And basically everything was bound to happen. And then the following happened. I decided to file a FOIA. Because you first, before you go angry, you want to know what's really going on. So then I was phoned 10 minutes later by City Hall, by the responsible person, and he said like, you filed a FOIA, yeah. I need to forward it to the forest maintenance, yeah, what do you call it? The guys who maintain the forest. And they will contact you and then grant you the access to the documents. But you know, that could last a couple of hours. And then indeed in the afternoon I got a phone call, and a couple of days later I was in his office. And the guy said like, this is the file, take what you need. I've never had something like that. And then when I asked him why, he said like, well, you don't need to say that you're transparent, you need to be transparent. You know, it's a very nice guy. So I made a copy. And then I was reading through the documents like 2 or 3 days later.